Hey everyone, welcome to Operations, the show where we look under the hood of companies in hypergrowth. My name is Sean Lane. It's pretty interesting, the pattern that I've seen again and again for how operators end up prioritizing their internal customers. Sales is usually the loudest voice, and they usually need the most help, so they get the most attention, especially when ops reports into sales as well. CS and post-sale teams at early stage companies aren't ever as high on the priority list as the new logo acquisition team, so they usually don't get nearly as much love as they should until churn starts to rear its ugly head. Marketing somewhere in between usually, and sometimes there can be a little bit more self-sufficient. And then way over there in the corner, shrouded in mystery and held together with duct tape and spit, is your partner team. Sometimes affectionately referred to as the Wild Wild West, partner programs at fast-growing tech companies usually will abide by their own set of rules. And I don't really get why. So I wanted to talk to someone who spends all day thinking about how to make partner teams more successful. That someone is Greg Portnoy, co-founder and CEO of Euler, the home base for partnership teams. In addition to starting Euler 2 years ago, Greg has led partnership teams at 4 different companies. So he's seen the full spectrum of what works and what doesn't. In our conversation, we talk about why partner teams don't get any love from RevOps. We cover why measuring partner influence isn't the silver bullet that most teams think it is, and how partner teams and partner ops can tag team to run experiments together. To start though, I asked Greg why he thinks that partner teams get the least amount of love from ops.
Oh, man. There's a number of reasons for that. It really varies by organization, the balance of this. But one, partnerships generally gets a minimal or maybe less than it should amount of love and attention from like the GTM and the C-suite and everybody in general, right? So if you just think about the trickle down of that and ops just kind of doing the things that they see as like core priorities for the business, they're like, well, people don't really seem to care that much about partnerships or prioritize it, so I'm not going to either. That's part of it, for sure. Another part of it is like, look, ops aren't magicians. They have to have some level of direction or instruction or guidance on kind of what needs to be done. And so if they haven't ever built ops for partnerships before, which the vast majority of ops folks have not, they would look to the partner leader, the partnerships team for some guidance. The challenge with that is that a lot of partnerships teams are not that process oriented as they should be. They don't have good foundations of process and they don't have good best practices or frameworks from which they want to operate. So because of that, it's a little bit of a chicken and egg thing where ops is like, hey, we'd love to help you. If ops is like, we'd love to help you. If the partnerships team can't give them good guidance on what that actually looks like and what they need them to build, they're going to be like, okay, this is too ambiguous. I'm going to go do something that I feel more comfortable doing that I can actually like, because ultimately, look, ops are just employees like anybody else. They need to show results. And if they're just out here kind of trying to create something out of a lump of clay, they may choose to go a path more traveled.
And I think the first thing you said is super interesting, right? When you don't have that kind of like either sponsor at the C-suite level or someone who is kind of holding the partner organization accountable to a particular set of metrics, then absent those metrics, then you really start to like kind of choose your own adventure and figure out a different way. So like, what do you typically see as kind of the pitfalls that people fall into in that environment where they're like, okay, I know I want to instrument or, measure the impact that my team is making in some way, but I don't really know how.
From the ops perspective or the partnerships perspective?
Both.
Yeah. So look, I was very lucky. My first VP of partnerships was very data-driven and process-oriented. So this is actually just the way I learned to do partnerships. I didn't come up with this. I didn't see multiple options and say, like, this is the right way. This is the way I was taught, and it worked, and so I kept doing it. And so as part of that, you realize, or I should say I realize now that I have been building Euler and I have a much broader view into dozens, if not hundreds of partner programs, not just the ones that I'm building, is that partnerships right now is viewed largely as kind of this ambiguous, unpredictable, amorphous thing. It means different things for different businesses at different stages in different sectors. And that's not specific enough for the C-suite or anybody else to really kind of buy into. And so what needs to happen is that partnerships can be much more predictable. Look, at the end of the day, it can't be as predictable as sales because you have an external variable, which is the partner. And you can't always predict what the partner is going to do, right? But you can get close and you can create structure around it. So managing partnerships like you manage sales in a lot of ways. A lot of partner teams don't actually manage a partner pipeline. They don't have a separate pipeline for partner like acquisition, onboarding, activation, enablement, so on and so forth, to see how the partner is kind of like moving through their both acquisition and activation and enablement and basically just lifecycle flow, right? So understanding, hey, okay, just if we're trying to do some back of the napkin kind of math, hey, okay, well, we need to hit $1 million number this quarter. And each partner on average can do, X amount of revenue, which means we need, 1 million divided by X amount of partners. And therefore, to activate 10% of the partners, we need 10X the partners in the pipeline, right? And you can create a funnel. These numbers, again, are slightly less predictable than in sales, but you can get there. And so creating that process of predictability and structure from the very beginning, and then figuring out, and here's really where the challenge becomes, and this is why partner ops is really, really tough. The biggest challenge is that partnerships, unlike sales, unlike marketing, they are nonlinear relationships, right? You meet a partner, you sign a partner, then you have to train a partner, then that person leaves and you have to train someone else, and then they send you a customer, but it's a different kind of customer, and then you have to train them on this other thing. And then maybe you're not sending them enough business, and over here you're doing a co-marketing activity, and over here you're doing co-selling, and this one's a referral, and that one's an integration. I mean, there are just so many different ways that you can work with both one partner and multiple partners. And tracking and measuring all of that is incredibly difficult, which is why we built Euler. But back to your question, I know I've gone down a little bit of a rabbit hole here, but the whole idea is that everything, as much as humanly possible in partnerships, the entire life cycle and every stage of the life cycle should be tracked and measured. And then you should try to optimize it where you can. And the only way you can do that, I call partnerships experimentation. The only way you can do that is by running experiments, right? And understanding like, okay, we have a hypothesis that we can drive this number from this many partners of this type. So we're going to go and test that hypothesis for a quarter and see how many partners do we think we can go from initial conversation to activated partner. What's that ratio? And then how many deals can each partner, how much revenue can each activated partner drive in a quarter? It's another experiment. And I'm going to try this with agencies and system integrators and technology referral partners and affiliates, right? It's all just experimentation, but most partner teams are very unstructured in all of this. So if they come to ops and say, hey, I need you to do something for me, if they can't come to you with at least a clear idea of what that experiment looks like, how are you supposed to create a framework and a process from which they can successfully run, track, and measure that?
Greg is a partner guy after my own heart. He says partnerships is experimentation. He says every stage of the partnership lifecycle should be measured. And he says that partner teams with a lack of clarity around what they're testing are the ones who find themselves adrift when it comes to a clear, coherent strategy. And look, I don't envy partner folks. Running effective partner teams is so hard. As Greg mentioned, you get less love from the C-suite. You're trying to prove that these non-linear relationships will someday bear fruit. And oftentimes the time horizons to realize that yield can be long. Which is why I think Greg's first partner leader in his career clearly had such an impact on the way he goes about his work. And why so many of us are the products of the leaders that we either had or didn't have earlier in our careers. I wanted to dig into what made that leader so impactful and what Greg took away about the, quote, right way to run a partner org?
It was about being, again, data driven. So what happens most of the time is a C-suite member or a head of sales or somebody hears about partnerships, or they see a competitor. Hey, our competitor's got a big partner ecosystem. They're driving, 25% of their top line from partnerships. Like, we should go do that. So they're like, we also want 25%. And if, we're doing $10 million in revenue, we think we should get $2.5 million of revenue in the first year from partnerships. Now, let me decide all that in a vacuum and then go hire a partner leader and say, hey, Mr. Partner Leader, welcome to the company. Here's your $2.5 million number.
Yep. And
then the partner leader is just scrambling, trying to grasp at straws, throwing as much stuff at the wall as humanly possible to see what sticks. And this all happens in a very unstructured way. The correct way to do it is basically say, okay, what do we believe is possible to achieve? What is that goal? Let's find somewhere to meet in the middle between what, the CRO wants and what is even moderately realistic. Let's set that number and let's back out of that. Again, based on that, we need X revenue from partners, which means this many partners, which means this many conversations, which means this many deals, so on and so forth. It's really not that complicated, but you have to have some sort of a mathematical equation behind it, right? And so a lot of folks, they come at it from a purely let's just throw a bunch of stuff into the funnel and let's see what happens. And then if we're not getting enough, let's just sign up more partners, or let's, increase our rev share or something like that. It's very unscientific.
And what's your recommendation on the right way to count that stuff, right? Because certainly it differs depending on the type of partner model you have, whether it's referral or reseller or some sort of affiliate program, right? But I've been in those meetings where you're sitting there okay, what's the definition of partner sourced? What's the definition of partner influenced, right? And people haggle over that stuff all day. What is the right way? If the $2.5 million number that you just mentioned is the number, how do we count that, right? What should we put in that $2.5 million bucket?
Yeah, that's a great question. So while I love partner influence, and I think that there's a lot of businesses that get a lot of value from partner influence, I don't think that that's a flagship metric that partnership should hang their hat on, right? I think that that's very much a icing on the cake kind of a metric. And I don't think it's one, depending on the level of complexity of your business, especially as you go up market, bigger deals, more enterprise, influence really does play a role. And this depends on whether it's a service influence, an integration influence, or just a recommendation influence. There's different levels. But let's put that one aside for a minute. So if we're talking about sourced revenue in my mind is an opportunity. It doesn't matter where a lead comes from. In the age of Apollo and Clay and Zoom Info and all this stuff, everyone has every single prospect they could ever possibly go after as a lead in their CRM. I think lead source is pretty pointless at this point. I think the source that matters is opportunity source, right? Who actually got an active opportunity going here? And this may have been a customer that multiple SDRs have reached out to and that came to a marketing event and so on and so forth. And if we're being honest, if you look at the data, we're talking about 28 on average touch points for someone to convert for B2B SaaS, right? It's no one thing that did it.
Yep.
But if the partner is the one that got them to actually start an active sales cycle, an active opportunity with you, that's partner sourced. In my mind, that's really the only thing that matters. If they came to a marketing event and they're all right, let's have this conversation, that's a marketing opportunity source. If an SDR reached out to them and they said, all right, I'm ready to take a demo, let's have this conversation, that's, outbound, right? But if a partner makes that referral or tells them to come to you and they come and they say, yeah, this partner just told me about you, or the partner is doing another deal with them and they bring you into the deal or something like that. If this opportunity exists because of that partner, that's partner source.
Got it. All right. So if we continue to work our way kind of down the funnel from that moment, right? The next thing that partner leader is going to go to their ops team and say is, I need a way for folks to be able to submit leads. I need a way to be able to track referral agreements. I need a way to be able to have the visibility you were talking about before into the open pipeline that our team isn't really working. The partner's not going to give us updates on in our CRM. All of that is what's going to come next from the partnerships teams going to their ops partners. And I think there's a crawl, walk, run your way towards, best in class. And I know you guys are also solving some of those problems at Euler, but what is the right way to start to think about kind of the end users as partners and the end users as the other internal folks on your team, right? Because for me as an operator, I have to consider the experiences of both of those groups.
Yep, absolutely. So I'll start with the internal stakeholders first, because that's a much easier thing for you to tackle. The partner experience is something, obviously, you need something like a Euler for. But internally, again, the idea is that if let's just use sales for an example. If your SDRs or your AEs, they have a structure within the CRM or within the tools that are integrated into the CRM to effectively track, they have a number, and partner managers should have a number, in my opinion. They have a number and they should be tracking against that number. And let's just say you're using Salesforce as a CRM just because Salesforce is so malleable. And that's the one that I've built pretty powerful things in. They have a number, they have a partner portfolio. They should be able to track and measure a lot of that in the CRM. I believe that the CRM should be the source of truth for everything partner account related, customer account related, customer opportunity related, right? And so being able for a partner manager and a partnerships team on the whole to track their, again, pipeline of partners, to be able to track the pipeline of deals associated with those partners, and that could be sourced, that could be influenced, and to be able to easily see whether either in Euler or in like a Salesforce or a HubSpot, to be able to see okay, how are we tracking against that number? Again, partnerships teams are not used to being held accountable or as they should be to these things. And that's partially because they just haven't had that, they haven't been held accountable a lot, but also they just haven't had the mechanism by which to do that. Because again, if you're just scrambling to hit your number, for the same reason salespeople don't enter stuff in Salesforce, and those are pretty simple, again, linear relationships relatively, partnerships teams certainly don't, because they're just scrambling to hit their number. So all of this reporting and process and tracking always falls to the bottom of the priority list. And so if sales ops can help set that up and help set up accountability and tracking mechanisms in the CRM for partnerships teams, because we haven't really talked about this yet, but before you implement something like a Euler, for example, you mentioned crawl, walk, run, I believe the first system of record that partnership should be using is the CRM. Mm-hmm. The next is probably spreadsheets, because there's things that the CRM taps out on with regards to partner relationship management pretty quickly. But then use spreadsheets. Then once you have partner market fit, your ideal partner profile, you have traction with partnerships, you see results coming in, and you're okay, we need to pour fuel on this fire. You will hit operational constraints of operating out of spreadsheets pretty darn quickly, right? Mm-hmm. That's when you implement a tool like a Euler, where you're hey, we need something that's built for partner operations. We need something that's built to simultaneously create amazing efficiency and tracking for our internal partnerships team and external visibility and engagement for the partner. That's where you bolt that on. But we even when I talk about Euler, we talk about it as a partnerships wrapper around the CRM. The CRM still needs to be the core. And you may or may not be surprised to hear that a lot of the partnerships teams we talk to, and in general, do not have the CRM as their kind of core operating system.
First, no, I'm not surprised by that at all. Second, isn't it interesting the way that Greg talks about how partnership teams historically haven't been held accountable to the right things? He talks to more partner teams than just about anyone. And he's basically saying that the expectations internally for a direct sales team and a partner team are very different. And we as operators, I think, feed into that. We're so laser focused on running all of our direct teams' routines and rhythms out of our CRM and our other sources of truth. Yet, I think because of maybe the nonlinear nature of partnerships, we struggle to extend this same rigor to our partner teams. Or maybe their contribution just isn't big enough to warrant our attention. It's a vicious cycle. If you think about it, it's kind of ironic because ops teams and partner teams actually have a lot in common. We're both trying to provide value to a broader organization, yet the perception of our teams might not always be that of a value add. We should be pushing together in the same direction. So I wanted to know how Greg helps partner teams both provide value and manage how they are perceived by other internal stakeholders.
One of the biggest challenges in partnerships is that internal perception issue.
Yeah.
And it's something that, again, I see as a big gap for a lot of partnerships teams. And this one is not because they don't know they need to do it. It's honestly because, again, they have other things that they're prioritizing above it, understandably, like hitting their number. But one of the biggest challenges is communicating internally and partnering internally as much as you're partnering externally. Because again, you would assume that the people you work with at the same company, you're all rowing in the same direction. You've all got the same goals. You've all got the same level kind of respect for each other and stuff. But look, salespeople are salespeople, and everybody is kind of like focused on their own goals and focus. And so when you go to a partner, you're essentially assuming like, hey, you're an external business. You have your own business to run. You have your own goals. You have your own motivations, and I'm asking you to do something for me, but in doing so, I am also sharing in some way how this will be beneficial to you. And you generally try to lead with that second part, because otherwise, how are you going to convince somebody outside of your company that doesn't owe you anything to do something for you? They need to know what's in it for them. And yet, partner teams often go to their internal teams and skip that piece and assume like, well, I don't need to tell you what's in it for you because we work at the same company, and therefore, like, you're somewhat obligated to do so. And the fact of the matter is that's just not true most of the time. And so you have to treat the people in your own company honestly as a safe bet, just the same as you would treat somebody externally. Like, here's what partnerships is. Here's what it can do for you. Here's what it has done for, Jimmy and Jane on the team. And here's what little bit of something I would need from you in order for me to help drive that success or value for you internally, whether you're marketing, whether you're sales, whether you're ops, whether you're, product, whoever it is. And so again, you can't do, I keep coming back to this, but again, because partnerships teams are so brutally deficient in both process and data, you can't do that without process and data. If you don't have data, you can't say, hey, so let me just tell you guys that our acquisition costs through partnerships are X% lower. Our sales cycles are X% faster. Our win rates are X% higher. Our ACV is this much higher. Our marketing reach is this much broader. Our customer lifetime value is this much. Like, you can go to every single team. Our product adoption is this much higher if they're using 1, 2, 3 integrations. These are real metrics that are almost always better with partnerships. And if you go to each of these teams and show them how you're making them more successful in their goals through partners, that's a very different conversation than just being like, hey, product, why aren't you getting somebody on for this integration call? Or, hey, sales, why did you circumvent this partner on this deal? Or, hey, marketing, why didn't we invite a partner to co-sponsor with us? You really have to do that work internally, and you really have to do it in a very kind of like data-driven, in your face. You could go it alone, or you could be more successful if you go it with partners kind of a way.
And I think you need to clear out any other potential exits from that ideal path, right? And so I completely agree with you. If you're coming to the table with higher win rate, higher ASP, then there's very little reason for a sales team to say, I don't want to incorporate that in my process. However, if there's something in your comp plan that disincentivizes that relationship or says, you will make more when you don't have to, include the partner or something, right? Like, that's what I mean by off ramps from the path that you're trying to describe. And so I think also looking around corners a little bit as a partner leader and an ops leader to say, all right, we're not seeing the type of kind of partner attach rate or kind of interactions between the partner and direct teams that we would expect. Like, why is that happening? And I think looking at comp is a great starting point to figure out, is there anything that we're doing to either incentivize this behavior or disincentivize this behavior?
Absolutely. Look, the people you need to work with, which are most likely going to be sales or customer success or account management, those are the most coin-operated people in the business, right? And so if you're not pulling those levers to help it succeed, then someone else is pulling those levers to prohibit the success, right? Yeah. And that's a really good point. And the thing you bring up goes back to that executive alignment. The sales director isn't making that call. That's above their pay grade. That's a CRO. That's a CEO. That might be a board level conversation. And that's why I always kind of also very much evangelize for that executive alignment to get that from the top down. Because again, if everyone's swimming in the same direction, you'll go so much further, so much faster.
For those of you taking notes like me, now's a great time to write down any potential friction points in the relationship between your partner team and the rest of the business. Is it comp? Is it internal politics? Is it misalignment on strategy? Did someone on your board make a disparaging comment about your partner team? As Greg says, it's all about figuring out how you can get to where you want to go faster. So, in that spirit, let's dig into some of those experiments that Greg alluded to earlier. These experiments aren't easy to pull off, and you as a partner operator need to be an adept cross-functional steward of your own experiments in order to pull them off and ultimately get people to care about your thing. So, what are those experiments that people should be running? Here's Greg.
It really can be around any and every part of the partner lifecycle. So it could be an experiment around partner acquisition and doing outbound to prospective partners. I mean, it depends on, if you're a small fish in a big pond, big fish, small pond sort of situation, but it could be around partner acquisition. It could be around partner enablement, training and certification. It can be around just even like in partner incentivization. Hey, are we doing a spiff, like, hey, we're going to pay $100 for every qualified demo? Are we just doing a rev share? Is that going directly to the company or is that going to the rep? For example, at the partner, one of the, and we've built this into Euler, not trying to plug it, but we are plugging holes. But like one of the biggest glaring gaps in partnerships is that partner managers don't have client relationships. Sales reps do, account reps or CSMs do. And yet, the way that these relationships work is you have client-facing teams all funneling down into a partner manager who talk to each other. So if someone over here wants something, they have to go to the partner manager who goes to their other partner, the other partner's partner manager, who goes to a salesperson or account manager, and then back. It's a very inefficient process, right? So one, allowing those folks to talk to each other, number one, and enabling them and getting them their information they need without having that bottleneck of the partner managers. But the other one is like, well, what if we actually gave an incentive directly to the client-facing teams at the partner and said, hey, you guys are the MVPs, kind of the unsung heroes of partnerships, because you're introducing us to your clients, we're introducing you to our clients, we're co-selling together, we're co-marketing together, and yet you're totally cut out of the process unless someone's either tapping you on the shoulder asking for something or patting you on the back to say thank you, but neither of those things can be cashed. So maybe you incentivize those folks directly. That's another type of experiment of like, what if we gave that spiff, hey, the rev share goes to the business, but the spiff goes to the rep? What if you run an experiment about like co-marketing with a partner and see, hey, did we, by bringing in this partner, sure, we had to share the list with them, but how much bigger did our reach get on this webinar or this in-person event or what have you? Obviously, there's the ones we talked about around like, hey, did this shorten the sales cycle, increase our ASP, increase our win rate? Things like that. I mean, those are super, super easy. And it's really about it's really about running experiments about how do we improve the partner experience and how do we improve the outcomes from partnering, right? And the two things are linked, but I think that a lot of times businesses will focus on just the outcomes piece and they don't really think about the partner experience. And it's exciting to see partnerships gaining a broader adoption or broader conversation now, because that means partnering is becoming more competitive. More companies are trying to partner with each other. And if you have multiple companies of the same type trying to partner with you, you're going to partner with the one that creates the best partner experience and that just gives you the most value for the value you're giving them. And that just encourages better practices and better experimentation. But I'll say one more thing in the experimentation. Like when a new partner program is starting, they're like, okay, where do I start? How do I know who to partner with? And I basically tell them, I'm like, okay, look at your customer, look at the value ecosystem around them, figure out, where you fit in that value ecosystem of vendors, who's directly to your left in the decision-making kind of flow, who's directly to your right, who are the ones that you can work naturally with, either other products or services businesses that you can naturally send each other business. Okay, pick 3 to 5 types of businesses around your customer, then pick 3 to 5 companies within that type of business. And usually I say go like small, medium, large. And then go run experiments with each of those, get a few of each of those types and run experiments. And you'll start to see like, oh, very easy to partner with these types of companies where we were already sending each other referrals in the first month and they're super bought in. And we have a Chinese menu of value that we can provide to a partner and they have a menu of value they can provide to us. And what they have to offer, we want, and what we have to offer, they want. And this partnership just really took off and it was low hanging fruit. And then you have I want to go partner with Deloitte and Ernst & Young, the GSIs that everybody partners with because their account list is so sexy. And that takes 12 to 24 months to get any movement with one of those companies, if you'll ever get it at all. And that's the kind of experimentation I'm talking about is you just don't know what's going to work in partnerships unless you've built this exact type of partner program in this exact sector for another competitive company, right? But the likelihood of that is small.
How do you pick what the right time horizon is for those experiments, right? Like you just mentioned the kind of the big players in terms of, hey, it might take a year to 2 years. A lot of places aren't going to have the patience for that unless, to your point, that's something that they've very specifically done with that type of partner and that type of industry before. And then there's also like the people on the ground who are doing the work for all that time, who are trying to prove that the seeds they're watering are actually going to turn into something at some point, right? So like, one, how do you set the right time horizon to know whether those experiments are going to pay off? And then two, how do you message and talk about it internally and still hold people accountable to like the steps in between that inevitably are going to be required in order for this thing to be worth so much more in year 2, 3, 4?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, that goes back to that entire concept of around like that executive alignment and that internal alignment. Again, this doesn't work, or I should say it very, very rarely works unless you just got lucky, where the executive team went and just set a number and set a timeline in which they would like that number to happen. And then essentially just gave it to the partner leader that they brought on. And then this person's just kind of like scrambling and starting behind the 8 ball versus coming in and having a thoughtful dialogue about it and say, okay, what are we trying to achieve here? Why are we trying to achieve it? How do we believe this can be achieved? Okay, let's put together a strategy that has numbers and timelines. I do think partnerships teams do need to be more comfortable committing to outcomes. I will say that.
Yeah.
But let's just say that that's the case. And you come up with this strategy and then you go and you have that conversation internally with those stakeholders and say, hey, these are the outcomes we believe that we can achieve. This is the timeline in which we believe we can achieve them. And these are the resources that are going to be necessary to do that. Is everybody good with that? Mr. Sales Leader, are you good with that? Marketing Leader, are you good with that? CEO, board member, are you guys good with this? Okay, this is what we're committing to. Everyone has agreed that this is the strategy, this is the timeline, this is the resources. All right, let's go execute. That shouldn't take more than a month, maybe 2 or 3 if this is a really complicated business and the partner leader needs to like ramp up to that, right? But it shouldn't take very long to build and agree upon that strategy, and then you can go execute versus, again, trying to throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. If you have a plan, sure, the plan you will deviate from the plan, but you have to have a plan. And just a lot of partner leaders don't get the latitude to go in with that plan and to have that internal discussion and to agree on those outcomes and those timelines.
Partner leaders, did you catch that? Get comfortable committing to outcomes. And senior leaders, did you hear that? Stick to the time horizon that you all agreed to so your partner folks can go execute. Only when both of these things take place will the true potential of partner teams be realized. Now, I also think that for all the compelling reasons that Greg has outlined for why partner teams are getting more attention right now, another key ingredient is that there are new and better technologies available for partner teams to leverage. You've got better product usage insights, better orchestration between integrations. These create more and more opportunities for creativity when it comes to triggers and actions that companies can take with their partners. So this is how I'd make my bets for my experiments, leveraging these product-based triggers, and then I'd coordinate all of the necessary folks around executing those plays. Turns out, that's what Greg is seeing within his work with Euler customers.
I was speaking to a partner leader recently at a big B2B tech company, and they said that when a customer is using one of their integrations, the ASP is typically 50% higher. When they're using two integrations, the ASP is typically 100% higher. And it kind of went up from there. And it's not because they charge more to use the integrations, but it means the customer is that much more engaged with their product, and they're planning to use it in a much more advanced way, right? Plus, it also makes your product sticky. The reason that companies build integrations is because they want these systems that are doing different things to come together to create a cohesive experience, workflow, solution, whatever, data set, which means that these things are filling gaps for each other. And it means that if you're using something that is integrated with some other things you're using, that product is then stickier. So you're very, very right. Like, integrations are a huge, huge benefit to that. And it kind of comes back to that importance of that strategic conversation, where most businesses and most, let's just call it functional area leaders, they really just kind of see like their area, right? Sales sees sales, marketing sees marketing, product sees product, customer success sees customer success. Sure, they talk to each other. Sure, they have like their executive leadership team meetings and so on and so forth. But like, they're focused. I mean, the average tenure of a revenue executive in tech is like 18 months or something. You don't want to blame them for having that myopic focus to some extent. But I think the interesting thing is that partnerships isn't just like a revenue function. It's an entire business strategy. We've literally talked about how it touches every single team within the business and can help uplift every single team within the business. So if you have that strategic conversation early on, and it becomes very, very clear at the highest levels of the business decision-making pyramid that partnerships is going to raise all ships within the business, that's a very different conversation, right?
Yeah. I want to help folks connect like that strategic initiative to like the tactical ways that then they would actually pull that off, right? So let's assume you figure out that with integration A, your net retention rate goes up by a certain amount, right? Yep. And so then the goal, if I'm a good ops person, I'm going to sit there and say, okay, I want to go from having 10% of our customer base with integration A to 20% of our customer base with integration A by the end of next quarter. And so if I'm sitting there with that, like, how do you then take that and say, all right, what do I need to do tactically within the organization to reach that goal?
Yeah. So this is where it all comes back to the ops. This is where it all comes back to setting up the CRM for success. Again, as great as Euler is a partnerships operating system and data analytics platform. But CRM, Salesforce, HubSpot, that's going to be your ultimate source of truth for all of this information. So if you as an ops person are there to support the partnerships team and create the relevant fields, for example, so I'll just give you a very specific example of how I did this. When I was building the partner program at Attentive, this was before Crossbeam was really like a big thing, the account mapping software. And so when we would bring on partners, we would have them give us their customer list and we would share ours. We would then enrich that list. I would have my sales ops team upload that list to the CRM. Based on that, we knew which of our customer tiers or potential customer tiers each of these prospects fell into. We would associate a tier to them and therefore like an assumed value. And we would then be able to look into any prospect account or any customer account and see which partners they were working with. And then from there, you can obviously go find new deals or get help on existing opportunities, things like that. But then we would also track what integrations they were using, to your point. And we would have a field of like, just the integrations. I think the max that anybody was ever using at that time was like 3. So we had 3 fields. And then from there, like, again, it's just data capture. If you have that information and you build in the structure that makes it like relatively scalable to collect that data, from there, building reports in the CRM is old hat for ops folks. So it's really just figuring out, like, again, it goes back to that strategic conversation. If you know all the ways the partnerships can impact the business, then you really just think about how can we track that in the CRM in a scalable, structured way. And then from there, it's just reporting on it.
Before we go, at the end of each show, we're going to ask each guest the same lightning round of questions. Ready? Here we go. Best book you've read in the last 6 months?
Ooh, best book I've read in the last 6 months. I got this book called Hidden Genius at a conference. And it's a book where this woman went and like either spoke to or read about like some of the most successful people in history, and pulled out like little excerpts and found like the common threads between what made them successful or what made them exceptional. So it was pretty interesting.
Cool. I haven't heard of that one. I'll have to put it on the list. Normally, I would ask your favorite part about working in ops. I'm going to ask you your favorite part about working with ops.
Ops is foundational to scaling any kind of a go-to-market function, ultimately. Like, again, I didn't know what ops was until I had my first partner manager role where I learned how to do partnerships. But already there, we had a partner ops person there. And so I just learned how to do it with ops. And then when I've been at places without ops, I see how absolutely painful it is. And now that we sell to partnerships teams, like one of our processes is like we talk to the partnerships team and then we talk to the ops team. Like you can't buy Euler without us speaking to your ops team. And the companies that don't have ops support, it's just such a world of difference in how well their data is structured, how well their CRM is set up, how easily or not easily they're able to scale. And so I think ops is absolutely table stakes critical. And so I very much have always had a healthy love and appreciation for ops folks.
Flip side, least favorite part about working with ops?
I don't know where to, back to your question of like, where can ops people learn like partnerships best practices? I don't know where ops people learn like their regular best practices. But we've definitely encountered some that are just a little bit too creative. And I think that there's some companies we talk to don't use leads. Some companies don't use opportunities. Some companies don't use accounts. Some companies focus on the contact record. I mean, we've seen maybe not as much as you, but we've seen a lot of crazy stuff in CRM. And so I think my least favorite thing is like when they set it up in a unnecessarily complex way, or they're like super enamored with custom objects, which you and I both know create this like web of this house of cards, right? Inside of the CRM architecturally. So I think the least favorite thing is when they think that they just know everything and they set things up maybe not in a optimal way.
That's such a good answer. No, it's such a good answer because, it's not just for folks like you who might be trying to then sell to them. It's every single one of their stakeholders, right? And by the way, like that person's not going to be there forever. And so whoever comes after them is going to have to inherit that like creative mess of like novel solutions. Most of these problems have been solved somewhere else. And those are perfectly fine solutions to use. All right. Someone who impacted you getting to the job you have today.
Somebody who impacted me getting to the job I have today. God. The job I have today is running a software company. So, honestly, like my first VP of partnerships is a guy named Ryan Murden. He's the one that gave me my first shot at partnerships. He's the one that taught me what partnerships was. He's the one that kind of made me fall in love with partnerships. I could imagine if I had someone that wasn't as good as him and didn't enable me to be as successful as I was and to really understand like the true potential and value of partnerships, I may not have gone down that career path over a decade ago, which would not have led me to basically realizing like, hey, the way that we've been building, it's not common. And I want to build a solution that helps all partner teams operate in this elevated way to just be more successful. So probably Ryan.
Shout out Ryan. All right, last one. One piece of advice for people who want to have your job someday.
Oh God, I don't know if I would necessarily recommend it.
Run.
No, look, I would say make the leap. Like I thought that I was capable of and would like to start my own business and run my own company for a long, long time before I did it. Probably since I was like 18 or something, maybe even sooner. And it took me a really, really long time to just make the leap and to see that it is something that I'm both good at, but also really, really enjoy. And look, if I had started sooner, there's a very good chance I would have failed and not have been successful like we are now. I think the success that we're seeing now is based on the experiences I've had. But I would say just take the leap, believe in yourself, and the worst thing you can do is fail, and then fail fast. But you'll figure out, like even if you fail, you'll figure out if you were invigorated and excited about kind of being your own boss and building something.
Thanks so much to Greg for being on this week's episode of Operations, and shout out Dave Link, his co-founder, for making the intro. If you like what you heard from Greg today, make sure you're subscribed to our show so you get a new episode in your feed every other Friday. Also, if you learned something from Greg today or from any of our guests, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. 6-star reviews only. All right, that's going to do it for me. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time.